Once upon a time, in a remote village surrounded by dense forests and misty mountains, lived a young girl named Nebe. She was a bright and curious child, full of life and questions about the world around her. Nebe lived with an old woman she calls Mama, whom she has known all her life as mother. Mama lived far from the other villagers, in a small, isolated cottage on the edge of the forest. She had no friends or family and always cautioned Nebe not to talk to anyone in the village. Despite her stern warnings, Mama loved Nebe dearly. Nebe often asked Mama about her father, and Mama would sadly say that her father had died when she was very young. Mama would then hug her tightly and tell her stories of bravery and love, trying to fill the void with her affection. These stories were like magical threads, weaving a tapestry of courage and warmth around Nebe's heart. Mama's stories were always filled with heroes and heroines, brave warriors and wise leaders, who faced great challenges and emerged victorious. She spoke of Nebe's father as a valiant man, who had once been a protector of their people. In Mama's tales, he was depicted as a tall, strong figure with a kind heart and an unbreakable spirit. Nebe would listen intently, her eyes wide with wonder, as Mama described his heroic deeds and adventures. "Your father was a man of great courage, Nebe," Mama would say, her voice filled with pride. "He stood tall against the darkness and never let fear control him. He had a heart as big as the mountains, and a spirit as free as the wind." Mama's eyes would glisten with unshed tears as she spoke, and Nebe would feel a deep connection to the father she never knew. One of Nebe's favorite stories was about the time her father had saved their village from a marauding band of robbers. According to Mama, the robbers had descended upon the village in the dead of night, their eyes filled with malice and their weapons gleaming under the moonlight. The villagers were terrified, but Nebe's father had stepped forward, his voice calm and steady. "He faced them alone, Nebe," Mama recounted, her voice low and dramatic. "With nothing but his courage and his unwavering belief in justice. He spoke to the robbers, told them of the strength of our village and how we stood together as one. They saw the fire in his eyes, the determination in his stance, and they knew they could not break our spirit." Nebe would sit on the edge of her seat, her heart pounding as Mama described the confrontation. In her mind, she could see her father standing tall, his figure outlined against the night sky, a beacon of hope and bravery. "Your father convinced them to leave," Mama continued, her voice softening. "Not with force, but with his words and his heart. He showed them that true strength lies not in weapons, but in unity and love. The robbers left, and the village was safe once more. That is the kind of man your father was, Nebe." These stories filled Nebe with a sense of pride and longing. She wished she could have known her father, could have seen him in action, and could have felt the warmth of his embrace. But Mama's stories gave her a sense of his presence, a connection to a past she could barely remember. Mama would often end the stories with a gentle reminder. "You have his spirit, Nebe," she would say, her voice full of love. "You are brave and kind, just like him. Always remember that." Nebe treasured these moments with Mama, feeling a sense of warmth and safety in her words. Mama's tales were more than just stories, they were a lifeline, connecting Nebe to a father she had lost. This gave her strength and courage, helping her face the uncertainties of her own life with a brave heart. And so, every night, as the shadows grew long, and the forest whispered secrets to the moon, Mama and Nebe would sit by the fire, their hearts entwined by the stories of bravery and love. In those moments, the world outside their cottage seemed far away, and all that mattered was the bond they shared and the legacy of courage that Mama's stories bestowed upon Nebe. Nebe noticed that Mama sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, or during the day to go to an unknown destination. Nebe's curiosity grew with each passing day, but she respected Mama's privacy and never questioned her about it. However, the mystery lingered in her young mind. One night, Nebe decided to follow Mama. She quietly slipped out of bed and trailed behind Mama, careful not to be seen. Mama walked deep into the forest until she reached a small, hidden hut. Nebe watched as Mama entered the hut, and, Driven by curiosity, she followed and hid inside, making sure not to be noticed. Inside the hut, Nebe's eyes widened in shock. Standing before Mama was a giant snake with chains tied around its neck. To Nebe's amazement, the snake was speaking, pleading with Mama to free her and return her daughter so they could go home. Nebe was frozen in disbelief at the sight of a talking snake. Mama placed some eggs in front of the snake and left the hut without a word. Nebe quickly ran back home, her heart pounding. She couldn't understand what she had witnessed and was too afraid to confront Mama about it directly. The next day, Nebe couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. She asked Mama where she had gone the previous night. Mama, with a calm demeanor, replied that she had gone to check on her crops. Nebe knew this wasn't the truth but didn't press further. That night, Nebe had vivid dreams about the giant snake. She saw its eyes, full of sorrow and desperation, and heard its pleas for freedom echoing in her mind. The dreams were so real that Nebe felt compelled to do something. Determined to uncover the truth, Nebe sneaked out the following day without telling Mama, and headed to the mysterious hut. As she entered, she found herself standing face to face with the giant snake once again. This time, the snake looked at her with recognition and called her, "My daughter." Terrified, Nebe ran back home, her mind racing with questions. How could a snake claim to be her mother? And why was Mama keeping this creature chained in a hut? The next day, Mama went to the snake hut again. Nebe, hiding nearby, overheard their conversation. Mama told the snake that she had kept her for too long, and had decided to kill her the next day to finally find peace. The snake wept and begged for mercy, but Mama remained resolute. Determined to uncover the truth, Nebe sneaked out the following day without telling Mama, and headed to the mysterious hut. The morning sun had just begun to rise, casting long shadows on the ground as Nebe quietly slipped out of the cottage. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. She knew Mama would be furious if she found out, but Nebe couldn't let the mystery of the snake go unsolved. She had to know more about the creature that is very sure called her, "My daughter." Nebe moved stealthily through the dense forest, careful to avoid making noise. The forest was thick with underbrush, and every snap of a twig seemed loud in the early morning silence. Her path was lit by dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy, and the forest seemed alive with the rustling of leaves and the calls of distant birds. As she walked, memories of the previous night flooded her mind, the sight of the giant snake, the sadness in its eyes, and the sorrowful plea for freedom. Nebe's curiosity overrode her fear. What had Mama done? Why was the snake chained, and why did it claim to be her mother? These questions drove her forward, each step bringing her closer to the hidden hut. After what felt like hours of walking, Nebe finally reached the familiar clearing. The hut stood in the middle, looking even more mysterious in the daylight. She took a deep breath, her heart racing as she approached the door. She hesitated for a moment, gathering her courage, before quietly pushing the door open. Inside, the hut was dimly lit, with shafts of sunlight piercing through the gaps in the wooden walls. Nebe's eyes quickly adjusted to the darkness, and she saw the giant snake lying in the center of the room, the chains around its neck glinting faintly in the light. The snake turned its head slowly to look at her, its eyes filled with recognition and sorrow. "Nebe," the snake said softly, its voice filled with a strange mix of hope and despair. "You came back." Nebe stepped inside, her fear momentarily forgotten in the face of the snake's gentle voice. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "And was I the one you called your daughter?" The snake sighed, a long, shivering sound that seemed to echo in the small hut. "I am Oma, your true mother," she began. "Many years ago, I was turned into this form by a powerful spell, cast by the woman you know as Mama. She took you from me when you were just a baby, and I have been imprisoned here ever since." Nebe's mind raced as she tried to process the snake's words. Could it be true? Was this snake really her mother? And had Mama, the woman who had raised her, really done such a terrible thing? She felt a surge of anger and betrayal, but also a deep sadness for the snake, Oma, who had been separated from her child for so long. Why would Mama do that? Nebe asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alma's eyes softened. She was lonely, Nebe. She had lost her own family, and desperately wanted a child to love and care for. When she found me, heavily pregnant and vulnerable. She saw an opportunity. She used an ancient spell to turn me into this form, and took you as her own. I do not hate her, for I understand her pain, but I have longed for the day I could be with you again. Tears filled Nebe's eyes as she listened to Amma's story. She felt a deep connection to the snake, and a growing resolve to right the wrong that had been done. I'm so sorry, Oma, she said, her voice breaking. I had no idea. Oma nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. I know, my dear, but now that you do, you have the power to help me. You can break these chains and free me from this curse. Nebe took a deep breath, her hands trembling. How can I do that? She asked, determination stealing her voice. Oma explained the ancient spell that bound her, describing the specific ritual needed to break it. It involved a rare herb that grew deep in the forest and a heartfelt plea to the spirits of the land for forgiveness and release. Nebe listened intently, committing every detail to memory. I will do it, she said firmly. I am good with herbs, Mama taught me. I will free you, Oma, I promise. Amma's eyes shone with gratitude and hope. Thank you, Nebe. You are as brave and kind as I always knew you would be. With a new sense of purpose, Nebe left the hut and ventured deeper into the forest to find the rare herb. She felt the weight of her mission, but also a growing strength within her. She was determined to reunite with her true mother, and uncover the full truth about her past, no matter what it took. The forest seemed to whisper encouragement as Nebe searched, its ancient trees and winding paths guiding her to the herb she needed. She felt a connection to the land, as if it were supporting her in her quest. Hours passed, and finally, Nebe found the rare herb growing in a secluded glade, its delicate flowers glowing faintly in the dim light. She carefully gathered the herb and made her way back to the hut, her heart pounding with anticipation. As she approached the door, she heard Mama's voice inside and froze. Nebe. Mama called out, her voice trembling with worry. Where are you? Are you in here? Nebe hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. I'm here, Mama, she said, her voice steady. And I know everything. Mama's eyes widened in shock as she saw the herb in Nebe's hand, and the determination in her eyes. She realized what Nebe intended to do, and tears filled her eyes. Nebe, please, you don't understand, she began, but Nebe cut her off. I do understand, Mama, she said firmly. You were lonely and desperate, but what you did was wrong. You wronged me and this woman, my mother. Oma deserves to be free, and I deserve my true family. Mama fell silent, her shoulders sagging with resignation. You're right, she whispered. I have no right to stop you. Do what you must. Nebe nodded and approached the snake, holding the rare herb tightly in her hand. She began the ritual, reciting the words Oma had taught her, and placing the herb on the chains. As she spoke, she felt a powerful energy surrounding her, and the chains began to glow with a bright, otherworldly light. The hut filled with a blinding radiance, and Nebe continued the ritual with unwavering focus. The chains shattered, and Amma's form began to shift and change, the curse lifting at last. When the light faded, a beautiful woman stood where the snake had been, her eyes filled with tears of joy and relief. Thank you, Nebe, Oma said, embracing her daughter tightly. You have freed me. Nebe felt a surge of happiness and love as she hugged her true mother. We're together now, Oma, she said, tears streaming down her face. Nothing will ever separate us again. Mama watched from the corner, her heart heavy with sorrow. I'm so sorry for everything, she whispered. I never had a child of my own, and the only man I have ever loved and married left me for another woman due to my inability to give him a child. Oh, I am sorry. I never meant to cause so much pain. Oma, now in her true form, forgave Mama, understanding the depths of her loneliness and desperation. However, she knew it was time to return to her own family and village. With a heavy heart, Nebe bid farewell to Mama. Although she was angry and hurt, she also felt a deep sense of compassion for the old woman who had raised her. Mama, tears streaming down her face, hugged Nebe tightly, whispering apologies and blessings. Oma, now free from her cursed form, gently touched Mama's shoulder and whispered her forgiveness. With their goodbyes said, Oma and Nebe set off on their journey back to their village. The journey through the dense forest was arduous. Oma and Nebe moved cautiously, avoiding treacherous paths and wild animals. Nebe, full of questions, learned about her true heritage. Oma recounted stories of her village, their people, and the life they had before the curse. As they traveled, Nebe's initial resentment towards Mama began to soften. She understood the loneliness that had driven Mama to such desperate actions, and she resolved to carry forward with a forgiving heart. After several days of travel, they reached the edge of the forest. The village of Amek lay before them, its huts and fields stretching out under the warm sun. Nebe felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was her true home, but it was also a place she barely remembered. Oma and Nebe entered the village, drawing curious glances from the villagers. Oma's appearance caused a stir, and whispers of recognition spread like wildfire. Children ran ahead, calling out for Mazi Odili, the village blacksmith, who had lost his wife and unborn child 12 years ago. Odili was in his workshop, hammering away at a piece of metal. When the children's voices reached him, he looked up, his heart skipping a beat at the mention of his wife's name. Could it be possible? Could Oma have returned after all these years? He dropped his tools and hurried outside, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. When Odili saw Oma and Nebe approaching, he froze. Tears welled up in his eyes as he took in the sight of his wife and the daughter he had never met. Oma, her eyes shining with emotion, ran to him, and they embraced tightly, their tears mingling as they held each other. Oma, Odili whispered, his voice choked with emotion. I thought I had lost you forever. Oma pulled back slightly to look into his eyes. I never stopped hoping, Odili. I knew I had to find a way back to you. Nebe stood a few steps behind, watching the reunion with tears in her eyes. Odili noticed her and, with a gentle smile, held out his arms. And this must be our daughter, he said, his voice breaking. Nebe stepped forward, and Odili enveloped her in a warm embrace. I've waited so long to meet you, he murmured. You are a blessing from the gods. That evening, the village gathered to hear the story of Oma's disappearance and her miraculous return. Around a large bonfire, under the starlit sky, Oma recounted the events that had led to her transformation and captivity. She spoke of Mama's initial kindness, her transformation into a snake, and how Nebe had bravely freed her. The villagers listened in rapt silence, their faces reflecting shock, sadness, and awe. When Oma finished her story, there was a moment of silence before the village elder stood up. We have been blessed by the gods to have Oma and her daughter returned to us, he declared. Let us give thanks and celebrate their homecoming. The days that followed were filled with celebration and joy. Nebe began to adapt to her new life, learning about her family's history and the traditions of her village. She was welcomed with open arms by the villagers, who marveled at her bravery and resilience. Oma and Odili's love for each other seemed to have grown even stronger during their years apart. They shared stories, laughter, and moments of quiet reflection, grateful for the second chance they had been given. Nebe often found herself thinking of Mama. She missed the old woman who had raised her and wondered how she was faring alone in the cottage. Oma noticed her daughter's pensive mood and decided it was time for a visit. Oma, Nebe, and Odili made the journey back to Mama's cottage. When they arrived, Mama was overjoyed to see them. Tears of relief and happiness flowed as they embraced and shared stories of their lives since they had parted. Oma and Odili invited Mama to come live with them in the village. They assured her that she would be welcomed and that they could start anew as an extended family. Mama, overwhelmed with gratitude, accepted their offer. Back in the village, Mama was welcomed with open arms. Her knowledge and wisdom, accumulated over years of solitude, became invaluable to the villagers. She helped with healing, farming, and shared her stories, enriching the lives of those around her. With time, the wounds of the past began to heal. Nebe flourished in her new environment, surrounded by the love and support of her family and community. She grew into a wise and compassionate young woman, admired by all for her strength and kindness. Oma, Odili, and Mama formed a tight-knit family, celebrating festivals, working together, and creating memories that would last a lifetime. The story of Oma, Odili, Nebe, and Mama teaches us about the power of compassion. No matter the wrong done to us as humans, it teaches us the importance of understanding in every situations, and the enduring strength of family bonds. Thank you, my lovers, for watching. Like, share and subscribe to my channel for even more interesting stories. God bless you all.